When I was 15, I overheard my father call me a burden. I remember standing by the doorway of his office, frozen, listening as he told my mother that I would never amount to anything, that I was nothing but a weight on his shoulders. He said I'd always depend on them, that I was weak and useless. My heart broke that day, not because of what he said, but because I realized he meant it. My mother didn't argue much, she just sighed softly, and I could tell from her silence that she had long grown tired of trying to change his mind. From that moment, I decided that I would prove him wrong, even if it meant leaving everything behind. My father was a businessman, proud, controlling, and cold. Everything in our house revolved around him, his moods, his meetings, his money. My mother, gentle and kind, was the light that kept warmth in that house. She always told me I had a good heart, that someday it would all make sense, that kindness was not weakness. I didn't understand then, but I held on to her words. After high school, I left home to study on scholarships, taking odd jobs to pay rent and tuition. My father refused to help, saying, "If you want to live on your own, do it on your own." So I did. I worked nights, slept little, and lived off instant noodles, but each small success, each exam passed, each rent check paid, felt like a silent victory over his words. Through the years, my mother would call me quietly, always asking if I was eating well, if I was happy. I knew she wanted to help me, but she had to do it secretly because my father disapproved. He thought helping me would make me soft. Still, sometimes she sent a little money or small gifts, always saying, "This is just between us." I didn't know then that she was fighting her own quiet battle, trying to protect me in ways I couldn't see. 15 years passed. I built my own life, far from them. I became an architect, got married, and had a son. We lived modestly, but we were happy. I hadn't spoken to my father in years. The only link between us was my mother, and when she passed away, I felt like that last connection broke. I went to her funeral quietly, standing apart from everyone. My father barely looked at me. His hair was gray, his posture still proud. I didn't expect anything from him, neither kindness nor forgiveness. A few weeks later, I received a call from a lawyer's office. They said my mother had left a will and that I was requested to attend the reading. My father, of course, was there too. He smirked when he saw me, as if wondering why I had bothered to show up. He had always made it clear that everything, house, business, assets, belonged to him. I assumed my mother had left me a small token, maybe some jewelry or a sentimental item. I was wrong. The lawyer began reading the will. My father sat confidently, hands clasped, waiting to hear how much he'd get. Then the lawyer's tone shifted slightly. He read, "To my beloved son, I leave the family home and the sum of $2 million held in my personal account." My father's head snapped toward the lawyer. "That must be a mistake," he said sharply. But the lawyer continued reading, explaining that the account and the deed were both solely in my mother's name. She had transferred ownership long before her passing, ensuring that I would inherit it without contest. The room fell silent. My father's face turned pale. He looked at me like he had seen a ghost. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not of losing money, but of losing control. I didn't speak. I didn't gloat. I simply signed the papers, thanked the lawyer, and left. The house that he once told me I'd never belong in was now mine. Later, when I walked through the empty rooms of that house, I could still hear echoes of my mother's laughter. I found small notes in her handwriting, tucked away in drawers, reminders of how much she loved me. One said, "Don't ever believe you are a burden. You are my greatest joy." I cried that day, not for the money or the house, but because she had believed in me when no one else did. She had quietly built a future for me while pretending to follow my father's rules. She had played his game and won, not out of spite, but out of love. I never confronted my father after that. He called once, asking to talk about the property, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The man who once called me worthless now had to live with the truth that his wife trusted me more than she ever trusted him. Years later, when I told my son about his grandmother, I said, "She taught me that love doesn't always shout, it sometimes whispers, plans, and waits for the right time." My father's words had once shaped my pain, but my mother's love shaped my strength. She gave me not just a house and money, but proof that I was never a burden, just misunderstood. The day my father tried to throw me out of what he called His house started like any other tense morning between us. I had returned after 15 years to settle some family affairs following my mother's death. I didn't intend to stay long, but the memories in that house pulled me in. Every corner held a piece of her, a laugh, a scent, a gentle word. My father, however, seemed more irritated than ever to see me there. He had grown older, but not gentler. His voice still carried that sharp tone that once made me shrink as a teenager. He walked into the living room where I was sitting quietly, sorting through some old boxes of my mother's things. "You've been here long enough," he said, his voice cold. "This isn't your home. Pack your things and leave by tomorrow." His words stung, but they didn't surprise me. I looked up at him calmly, asking, "Dad, did Mom not want me to stay here for a while?" "She said this was her house too." He scoffed, crossing his arms. "Your mother never owned anything. Everything here, every brick, every chair, is mine. You didn't earn a single thing in this life. Don't act like you belong here." The words echoed the ones he had thrown at me when I was young, telling me I'd never be good enough. But I was no longer the frightened child he once bullied. I stood up slowly, trying to steady my breath. "You can say whatever you want," I said, "but I'm not leaving until the lawyer finishes sorting through Mom's estate." That sentence alone made his expression change. He didn't like when anyone mentioned lawyers, especially not after the last meeting where Mom's will had been brought up. He had brushed it off, saying it was all formalities and that he'd handle it. I decided to let the truth handle him this time. A week later, the lawyer called both of us in to review some documents. My father was impatient, tapping his fingers on the polished wooden table. The lawyer greeted us politely and began to go through the paperwork. "Mr. Thomas," he said, addressing my father, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding property ownership." My father frowned. "What misunderstanding? This house has been in my name for 30 years. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and opened a folder. "Actually, according to the title deed updated 5 years ago, ownership was transferred to your late wife's trust, and she designated her son as the sole beneficiary." For a moment, everything stopped. My father's hand froze mid-tap. His face went from confident to confused, then to pale disbelief. "That's impossible," he barked. "I never signed anything. This must be a mistake." The lawyer calmly handed him the documents. "Your wife purchased your share of the property quietly through her personal funds. It was perfectly legal. She ensured that her son would inherit both the house and the attached assets upon her passing." I sat there, silent, watching as his entire world shifted. The same man who once said I didn't deserve a place in this house was realizing that it never truly belonged to him anymore. He turned to me with fury in his eyes. "You planned this with her, didn't you?" he accused. "You both plotted against me." I shook my head. "I had no idea. Mom never told me a thing. She must have wanted to protect something she loved from being destroyed." The lawyer continued, explaining that there was also a financial account tied to the property, one that contained enough funds to maintain it for years. Everything, legally and officially, was now under my name. I could have said something sharp or cruel. I could have reminded him of the times he called me a waste of space or told me I'd never own anything. But I didn't. I simply signed where the lawyer asked me to, thanked him, and walked out of the office. My father didn't follow me. He just sat there, staring at the papers that stripped away the illusion of control he had lived with for decades. When I arrived back at the house, I stood outside for a long time before unlocking the door. The same door he had once slammed in my face now opened easily. Inside, the air felt lighter, as if my mother's spirit had been waiting for this moment of truth. I walked into her old room and found a small box on the dresser. Inside was a letter written in her soft, familiar handwriting. It read, "My dearest, I know your father's words have cut you deeply, but I never doubted you. This house is yours because it was built with love, not pride. Promise me you'll fill it with laughter again." Tears blurred my vision as I read it over and over. My mother had seen what I couldn't, how much I had needed to feel like I belonged somewhere. She had taken the very thing my father used as a weapon and turned it into my shelter. The next morning, my father came to the house, his pride cracked but not gone. He stood at the door, eyes hard, and said, "So this is it. You win." I looked at him, feeling no anger, just sadness. "This isn't about winning, Dad. Mom wanted peace. Maybe you should try finding some." I closed the door gently. Weeks passed, and I began restoring parts of the house, keeping my mother's garden alive, repainting the faded walls. My son helped me plant new flowers by the porch. Every time I looked around, I remembered her words, "Fill it with laughter again." And so I did. My father eventually moved out of town. We never reconciled fully, but I think he realized what he had lost, not the house or the money, but the people who once loved him despite his cruelty. For me, it wasn't about revenge or inheritance. It was about closure. The house became a symbol of my mother's quiet strength and of the truth that love, even when silent, always finds a way to protect.